Okay, I'm going to take out the cam plate and quadrant and the cam plate plunger. I've got my zapper, so hopefully that will undo these two nuts without too much trouble. That's the quadrant. Okay. Nearly took my finger off. And that's for the cam plate. So I'll take off then the cam plate plunger at the bottom. So have a big spring on it. Oh. Okay, there's the plunger, which sits in the spring. Sits in there, spring loaded. So then we can take the actual cam plate out. Famous last words. Come on. There we go. That's the actual cam plate that actually selects the actual gears. This looks, I'll just get rid of the worst of the oil. Looks fine to me. And then we've got the quadrant. It's coming off. Which turns the cam plate to select the gears. Oh, yeah, so then briefly, you've got the quadrant, and like the gear lever kind of attaches into the knuckle there, and then that way, and then when you move the gear lever up and down, it moves the quadrant up and down. The quadrant has these teeth on which engage with the cam plate, and so then when you do when the quadrant turns, then that turns the cam plate. And each of these grooves here is a gear. So I think we've got first, I think, neutral, second, third, fourth. I'm not sure. I know it seems a mile to third and fourth, but I'm sure that's what it is. Unless we got first, no. Anyway, but that's what stops it drifting away. So if you're jumping out of gear, sometimes it can be that plunger that's simply not holding the plate, because you get a nice positive selection. So this turns, and then in here go the selector forks, and the selector forks connect to the gears, and so these channels move the forks around and pull and push the gears into position to locate, to choose a particular gear. And that's basically how the gearbox works. So what we've got now is we've got a nice oily gearbox, and we've got those two bearings in the end, the small one at the bottom, the layshaft bearing, and the main shaft bearing at the top. And we're going to, as we did with the crankcases, we're going to put this in the barbecue now and heat it up. Get rid of the sludge. There's a big black sludge in the bottom of this. This gearbox oil is really, really smelly, and I think that's suggesting that it's very old, which would make sense, because people don't tend to change their gearbox oil. You top it up from time to time, but you don't change it. To be honest, I don't think there is much need for changing the gearbox in normal use, the gearbox oil, when people don't. And I think that's why this is really smelly, because it's just really old oil. And then pong. Anyway, I've got to put this in the oven in a minute. So there's one last thing I've got to do, and that is I'm going to prise out the main bearing oil seal at the back there. So we just need to get that oil seal out. I'll prise that out before we put this in the oven, because obviously it's a rubber seal there, and We don't want to make a big smell or a big mess of molten rubber. I don't think it'd melt, but I think it's probably a good idea to take it out before we put it in the oven. Okay, there, and we've I just prized the seal out. There is a like the spacer that goes in the oil seal. I thought it was a strange looking oil seal. It's a spacer, and then there's an oil seal which we then just prized out. Open end on the inside, because open end always goes towards the oil. Okay, so now that's out, I'm going to go fire at the Barbie, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it up, and I'm going to hope that it's going to get hot enough that the bearings simply fall out, which is what they did with the crankcases. So if I get it nice and hot, I shouldn't have to knock those out at all. They should just fall out by themselves, which would be very nice. So we'll go up and see if we're successful with that. Wow, well that was a bit of a killer. I actually I've got the bearings out now, but they didn't want to come out, especially the layshaft bearing. See, now there's no way that you can get to the back of a layshaft bearing to knock it out, so you have to heat the casing and then whack it upside down. The main shaft bearing you can get to the back and knock it out. So I heated this up to about 400 Fahrenheit, so that's about 220 centigrade. Banged it, no, didn't want to come out that bearing. Got the main shaft bearing out, but not the lay shaft bearing, so I had to heat this up. I heated up to 500 Fahrenheit, which is 275 or something Celsius or centigrade, and banged it, and yeah, eventually the bearing just dropped out. So we now have the empty casing, which I shall clean up, give a good clean up with white spirit, and that goes the oil, and then we'll take that down. Oh, I've got to take the drain plug back out. It's only back in like finger tight. I just put it in to stop oil dripping out all the time while we're working on it. And we'll have that, we have the outside of it blasted as well. Interesting thing about the bearings, we're definitely going to be replacing them. But I always say that the convention is to have the lettering facing outwards. But on the gearbox, all the 3 bearings, so these 2 and on the inner race. So anyway, they all had the lettering was all facing inwards. So I don't know if that's a sort of gearbox convention. I don't know. But yeah, this is definitely a Portuguese. I'll see if I can get you can probably read the name there, can you? Where it says Portugal. So these allegedly were the sort of weak bearings on the lay shaft that would break up. And the trouble is, if your lay shaft jams, that jams the main shaft, jams the whole gearbox, and that means it's after the clutch, so that the back wheel will lock up. I want, not on this one, I tried, I did have a friend and his gearbox locked up whilst riding with his wife on the back. Thank heaven that it locked up. They were just going to a junction, they were just slowing down, and they were going about 10 miles an hour, the back wheel locked, and they just skidded to a halt. One dreads to think what would have happened if they'd have been going any faster. So this is weak bearing. This one looks absolutely fine, especially considering we had that the high gear, we had all that phosphor bronze breakup floating around the gearbox. This one seems fine, but obviously it needs changing, and you uprate them to a roller bearing, and we'll cover that obviously when we put the gearbox back together. But it'd be mad not to change this bearing and not to upgrade it to a roller bearing. Right, but there we go. That's all done. That's all empty. All ready to go off to be blast cleaned. Right, turning back to the gearbox outer. We just need to remove the actual gear lever. This is the pin that goes into the quadrant and then actually moves the quadrant, which moves the cam plate, but it moves the selector forks that move the gears that change the gear. So take these out. There. And it's all going to come off in one piece. So I'm going to leave it like that before I fully dismantle it. And again, I'm going to take some pictures of it because you have to be careful. This spring here, this fork spring here, that's got to be the right way up. Number one, there's a particular way up it goes, and then we've got the washers and that go in front of the main spring and so on. So I'll just leave that there for now. And so we've now got a fairly empty outer casing, and this I'm going to send this off for polishing. You can see it's taken some hammer. When this comes back, it should look like absolutely beyond brand new. So there's a level plug at the back. We're going to take that out, and there's the kickstart oil seal and the gear change oil seal. And we're going to lever those out. They're just like they're just O-rings. They're not like proper oil seals. So that's the from the kickstart, and then we've got the one for the actual gear change there. So those two seals are out. Just take this drain plug off, then this casing will be empty, and should be able to take it to be polished. I'm going to take the inner cases off to be blast cleaned, and the outer cases off to be polished. That's the level plug. There we go. Okay, so there we have the outer casing all clear. So I'll clean it up with white spirit. I'll get rid of all the debris. It's jobs like this I hate, but it's got to be done. And then I'll get all the white spirit on it to get all the grease and that off it. Clean it up and then take it off to be machine polished, and that will come up. I know you won't believe me, but you wait till you see it. That will look like chrome. When that comes back from the polishers, you'll think that this casing was actually chromed. That's how good they are. Right, and the final thing I'm dismantling is we've got the kickstart mechanism and the main shaft outer bearing to come out. I think that's, and then that case is fully apart, and I'll send that off. I think we'll have that blasted. Might as well, because everything else is going to look so good. But so it's got to be completely empty. So we've got to take the bearing out, got to take the kick shaft off. I'm a bit unsure about the kickstart shaft. I'll give it a go. So I think we're going to use some moles on the spring to try and release it without killing ourselves. There we go. Just eased it off the post. So we've released the spring, which should now come out. Encourage the spring to come off the kickstart by taking the tang out of the hole in the shaft. And there the kickstart, the shaft comes off the back. That's complete with the pawl. I think we'll be changing that pawl. That's all spring loaded. I'll leave it together for now. but I think we need to drive the pin out that holds the pawl in place and we'll be changing that pawl. You can see there's very slight wear on the edge there where it engages with the first gear. So whilst it's out, we might as well change that. Then I think the last thing we have to do is to remove the inner main shaft bearing. I shall just give that a slight tap, see if it wants to come out. Hint, hint, bearing. Otherwise I'll go and heat it up. So I'll get a socket of the requisite size and I'll just tap it through, see if it will come out. It's been pretty tight, I don't want to damage it. No. So I'm going to go and heat this casing up like I did the others and then knock the bearing out with a drift of the right size, which in our case is a socket. Okay, I heated the casing up on the Barbie to a very high temperature. I'm just going to knock this through now. There we go, it just comes straight out. Yeah. Interesting. Right. Okay, and that's the inner casing completely stripped. And so again, ready to go off we'll have that, we'll just have the outside blast cleaned along with the actual main casing of the gearbox.